Okay, let's dive into something that's becoming a really big piece of the puzzle as we shift to electric vehicles.
Hmm.
How do we actually charge all these cars? Especially, not just at home, but out there in the real world.
Right.
And let's maybe zero in on a city that really embodies this challenge, perhaps more than any other. Los Angeles?
Oh, yeah, LA.
You've got high EV adoption, but then you slam into these sprawling distances and, well, classic LA traffic.
It's kind of a perfect storm, isn't it? Need meets difficulty. LA seeing EVs pop up everywhere, which is great. Fantastic news.
Absolutely.
But the static charging infrastructure, those fixed stations, they just can't keep pace with the sheer volume and like the dynamic way people move across such a huge area.
Totally. And that really brings us to the core of what we're digging into today. We're exploring this burgeoning solution. Mobile EV charging.
Bringing the power to the car.
Exactly. Not the other way around. And look, this isn't just some niche idea anymore. Our source material really highlights that the market for these mobile units, especially the ones packing newer tech like wireless and solar, well, it's on a pretty significant growth path.
Mm-hmm.
We're seeing predictions of over 20% annual growth. Could hit around, $63 million just by 2025?
Yeah, that kind of growth really says something, doesn't it? It shows that the limits of the fixed stations are creating this very real demand for charging that's just fundamentally more flexible, untethered, really.
And right in the thick of this mobile revolution, according to the sources we've looked at, is this company called BeeCharge.
BeeCharge, okay?
They're flagged as a key player, really pushing the envelope on how charging can be, more convenient, more flexible, maybe even cleaner. We've pulled insights from a bunch of different places, articles, research, internal notes to try and get a handle on their approach.
So I guess our mission for this deep dive is to unpack those specific pain points of traditional charging, especially in a place like LA, look at the whole mobile solution landscape, and then really zoom in on BeeCharge.
Yeah, what makes them tick?
Exactly. We want to understand their unique tech, who really benefits from this kind of thing, and maybe what their work tells us about the bigger picture, the future of how we power our cars.
All right, mission accepted. Let's start there with the problem in LA. What are the real fundamental limits of just relying on those traditional fixed charging stations in such a, dynamic, traffic-clogged city?
Well, the most obvious thing is just location and availability, right? With fixed stations, you have to physically go to them.
Right.
In LA, that often means battling totally unpredictable traffic, just hoping a charger is actually open when you finally get there, and then maybe waiting in line. It's this whole logistical puzzle just to get electrons, and it eats up so much valuable time.
Yeah, I can just picture it. Getting stuck on the 405, watching your battery percentage drop, that range anxiety climbing, knowing you still have to fight more traffic just to get to a potential charger. Sounds incredibly frustrating for just one driver.
It really is. And now imagine that, but amplify it for fleet operators.
Right, yeah.
Think about managing a rideshare fleet, maybe a delivery service, covering these huge areas across the city. You need those vehicles available, constantly.
You can't make money parked.
Exactly. Relying on fixed stations means pulling vehicles off their money-making routes, maybe sending them way back to a central depot, or just crossing your fingers they find public charging somewhere during downtime. It demands super complex scheduling and often leads to significant vehicle downtime where they're just sitting, charging. It's a massive operational headache.
Okay, so the old model creates these bottlenecks, time, location, efficiency.
Yeah.
Which I guess tees us up perfectly for the BeeCharge way of doing things. Their core idea, like you said, flips the script.
Yeah.
Bring the charger to the vehicle. How do they actually make that work, hardware-wise?
So the sources describe their hardware as both modular and really scalable. Think of these modules, I guess. They can work on their own, but you can also stack them or link them together.
Modular and scalable. Okay, so you basically build the charger you need for whatever job you're doing.
That's the idea.
Yeah.
Their units offer adjustable DC fast charging outputs. Pretty powerful stuff, going up to 300 kilowatts, maybe even more.
Wow.
And the source material kind of positions them nicely. They're more capable than those smaller portable battery packs you might see, maybe like SparkCharge's Roadie units. But they're designed to be more mobile and flexible than those big fixed industrial chargers or, say, Ivesco's really heavy-duty EVMO series.
Okay.
So the modular part means if you just need a quick top-off for a regular car, maybe one module does the trick. But if you've got a whole line of electric trucks or vans needing a serious charge all at once, You can link multiple units together and deliver some serious power fast.
That scaling ability seems really key for all sorts of users, from one driver to a big depot.
And where do these mobile units actually get their power from? Are they just plugged into the grid with a super, super long extension cord?
Huh. Not necessarily. That's sort of their next key feature, off-grid operation.
Off-grid.
Yeah. I mean, they can connect to available power sources nearby if they're there, but they're designed with pretty significant onboard battery capacity. Or they can integrate with portable solar generators to operate completely independently from the grid.
Wow, completely off-grid. So they could deliver fast charging pretty much anywhere you can drive the unit.
That's the potential, yeah. The sources draw a comparison to SparkCharge's battery-focused charging as a service model, but they highlight that BeeCharge is layering in things like solar or larger battery storage for better off-grid resilience and capability.
So it bypasses needing a permanent electrical hookup.
Totally. Which is a huge hurdle in so many places, right? Especially for temporary needs or areas where the grid just isn't strong enough. And I'm guessing that leads right into the third big plus, rapid deployment. If you don't need to dig trenches or pour concrete pads, you can get these things where they're needed fast.
Precisely. Because they aren't tied down to permanent infrastructure and they can work off-grid, these chargers are incredibly quick to set up. They can use existing industrial outlets if they're around, or even simpler plugs depending on the power source. The key thing is they can be moved and running in just a fraction of the time it takes to, permit, build, and commission a traditional fixed station.
So for something like a big concert or a temporary work site, maybe even an emergency situation, you're not waiting weeks or months. You could potentially have charging access in like hours or days.
That's it. The sources actually use the phrase instant charging access wherever it's needed. It really highlights their sweet spot for temporary needs, event power, or those rapid response scenarios. That capability alone tackles a major pain point in dynamic places.
Okay, that makes the mobile and flexible aspects really clear. But how are they pulling this off with what feels like, I don't know, next generation tech? This is where our sources really get into the exciting stuff, the technology under the hood. What are the specific innovations driving BeeCharge's mobile solution?
Yeah, this is where BeeCharge seems to be integrating some really interesting forward-looking technology. First up, they're working with wireless charging and automatic plugless tech.
Wireless charging for an electric car. Like charging my phone just by putting it on a pad, but way, way bigger.
That's the basic idea, yeah. Inductive charging, it uses magnetic fields to transfer energy, no physical cable needed. It's an area that's developing fast, with standards like SAE J2954 coming along and pioneers like White Criticity really pushing it. BeeCharge is apparently developing mobile trailers that are compatible with this tech.
So down the road, you might just pull your EV into a spot near or maybe even over one of these trailers and it just starts charging automatically, wirelessly. No more messing with cables, maybe in the dark or the rain.
That seems to be the vision for certain uses, yeah.
Yep.
Especially beneficial for fleets, where that kind of automatic, repeatable process saves a ton of time and effort. It removes that physical interaction point, just simplifies the whole thing.
Makes sense.
Second, they're rolling out solar-integrated mobile units.
Taking that off-grid capability even further, I bet.
Exactly. Kind of inspired by how portable battery generators are now integrating solar panels. BeeCharge is developing these hybrid mobile charging units. They've got built-in solar panels that let them recharge their own internal batteries when they're idle, just using sunlight.
So the charger itself is soaking up rays while it waits for the next call. That adds a whole other layer of energy independence for the unit itself.
It really does. Reduces its need to plug itself into the grid just to refill its own power source.
Yeah.
It's like self-sustaining power generation for the charger fleet.
Clever.
Then there's a concept that's potentially really transformative. Bidirectional charging and vehicle-to-everything, or V2X potential.
Bidirectional?
Yeah.
Okay, that sounds like energy flowing both ways, not just into the car.
That's it, precisely. Most chargers are just one-way street, grid to car. Bidirectional means the EV can not only take power from a source, but it can also send power back out. And that capability is what unlocks V2X. It means the vehicle can interact with more than just its charger.
Everything. Like what kind of everything? The grid, buildings. Could it power my house?
Potentially, yeah. All of the above. The sources talk about future uses like V2G, vehicle to grid. Parked EVs could actually send power back to the grid during peak demand times to help balance the load.
Whoa.
Or V2B, vehicle to building. Imagine a fleet of EVs providing backup power for a whole facility if there's an outage. And yeah, even V2H, vehicle to home potential is there. What's really fascinating, kind of mind-bending actually, is how this totally shifts how we think about an EV.
Yeah, it's not just transportation anymore.
Right. It's no longer just a consumer of electricity. It becomes this potential mobile distributed energy resource. A parked car could actually become part of our resilience infrastructure.
That completely changes the game. My car could help keep the lights on at home if there's a blackout. Or, collectively, a whole fleet could support grid stability. That's a powerful idea.
It turns what seems like a liability, this big battery needing a charge, into an asset that can store and potentially discharge power where and when it's needed most.
Okay, but coordinating all this, mobile units driving around, cars potentially sending power back, that sounds complex.
It is, and that's where BeeCharge integrates smart dispatch and AI optimization.
Using AI to figure out where to send the mobile chargers.
Exactly. Their system uses AI algorithms to route the mobile charging units as efficiently as possible. The AI looks at multiple real-time things, where charging demand is popping up across the city, what the grid conditions are like if they are using grid power, and crucially important in LA, real-time traffic flow.
So it could predict, like, okay, demand's going to spike over here, or reroute a charger to avoid a massive jam on the 101 on its way to a customer.
That's the objective. Optimize how resources are used, minimize response times. The AI figures out the best unit to send, the fastest route, and it integrates with all this real-time monitoring data that feeds into fleet dashboards. It allows for really intelligent, data-driven management of their mobile charging fleet.
Okay, wow. So we've got the problem, fixed charging struggling, especially in a place like LA, and the solution, mobile power, with some seriously smart tech layered on top. Let's bring it back specifically to LA. Why is this city the perfect proving ground, according to the sources, for BeeCharge's whole approach?
Well, it's that combination of factors we touched on earlier. High EV adoption just means high demand, period.
More cars needing juice.
Right. But LA's geography and infrastructure issues are just as key. It's massive, it sprawls, and like we said, traffic is just a constant reality. Plus, you've got a huge chunk of the population living in apartments or condos without dedicated garage charging access.
Yeah, you can't exactly drape an extension cord across 6 lanes of Sunset Boulevard or easily get a high-speed charger installed if you only have street parking.
Exactly. The need for flexible, accessible charging away from a home base is just really acute there. And this is where the sources share a really compelling little story.
Yeah.
An LA rideshare driver apparently got stuck on the infamous 405 freeway, critically low charge.
Oh no, nightmare scenario.
Totally. Their options were basically try to limp to maybe a far-off fixed station or call for a tow truck. But according to the source, a BeeCharge unit was dispatched, got through traffic, and reached the driver within about 45 minutes.
Wow, 45 minutes on the 405. That's impressive in itself.
Right, and it gave them the charge they needed to just get back on the road and keep working.
That one story really just crystallizes the value, doesn't it? Solving a real-world high-stress problem by bringing the power right to the vehicle in trouble, in maybe one of the toughest traffic spots imaginable.
It perfectly illustrates that practical application of rapid deployment and mobile location-independent power. And the sources also kind of speculate on how the city itself could evolve to support this better. They mention ideas like parking lots being equipped for microgrids, or maybe incorporating structures like those kite-shaped solar canopies over parking areas.
Ah, so creating spots where these mobile units could easily base themselves or recharge.
Yeah, essentially turning existing space into potential charging zones, all facilitated by systems like BeeCharges.
So the city's challenges aren't just problems. They're actually creating the perfect conditions where these innovative mobile solutions become not just nice to have, but kind of essential. Okay, thinking about the impact then, who specifically really stands to benefit the most from this kind of mobile charging revolution based on what we read?
The sources definitely highlight several key groups. First off, people working in the gig economy. Rideshare drivers, delivery drivers.
Folks who are literally on the clock losing money if they're stuck charging somewhere.
Precisely. For them, mobile charging can really ease that range anxiety, especially during peak hours. But maybe more importantly, they can get charged while they're waiting for their next fare or during a scheduled break, instead of having to carve out this big chunk of time to drive to a station and wait. That time saving translates directly into more productivity, more income.
That's a massive tangible benefit for that whole segment of the workforce.
Absolutely. Then you've got larger organizations, fleets, and even the car manufacturers, the OEMs. For fleets, this offers a way to scale up their EV operations without the huge upfront costs and logistical nightmares of building out extensive fixed charging depots all over their operating area.
Right, avoids massive construction projects.
Yeah, and the modular mobile nature means they can put charging right where their vehicles actually are, supporting route-based operations and cutting down on that unproductive vehicle downtime.
So they can kind of weave charging right into their existing routes and schedules much more easily.
Exactly. Makes the whole transition to electric potentially much smoother operationally. Then you have event and logistics planners.
No?
Think about setting up charging for a huge outdoor music festival or a major convention center event, or even providing critical power during, say, a disaster response situation. Mobile units can be brought in quickly to create temporary charging infrastructure without needing complex and often slow temporary grid hookups.
That's a really powerful tool for those temporary high-density needs, whether they're planned or totally unexpected.
For sure. And finally, the sources even mention insurers and risk managers.
Really? How do they fit in?
Well, by reducing the reliance on massive construction for widespread fixed infrastructure, companies basically lower their exposure to site-specific construction risks, potential delays, all the costs associated with that. Plus, as we talked about with V2X, the potential for EVs to act as mobile power reserves adds this layer of operational resilience during grid outages or emergencies. That's a clear plus from a risk management standpoint.
Huh. It really does seem to offer benefits from a lot of different angles across different sectors. So looking ahead then, what does BeeCharge's roadmap suggest is coming next? And what does all this mobile tech tell us about the broader future of EV charging?
Yeah, the sources touch on some specific things on BeeCharge's radar for around 2025. They mention a pilot program for their plugless inductive charger tech, that wireless charging initially aimed at corporate fleets in LA and also Seattle.
Putting the wireless tech to the test.
Right. They're also planning the launch of a dedicated solar battery trailer. This sounds like it's specifically designed for things like gate-to-gate charging at big logistics hubs, or maybe providing power that can be recharged using rooftop solar panels already installed somewhere.
More steps towards that self-sufficient off-grid capability.
Seems like it. They're also focused on the software side, with an upgrade planned for their Fleet Dashboard V2.0, which will apparently incorporate more advanced AI for scheduling and predicting recharge needs.
Making the logistics even smarter.
And they're developing specific grid support modules. These sound like the units designed to actually enable those EV-to-grid functions we talked about, helping with demand response and supporting grid resilience.
So those roadmap items really clearly build right on those core tech pillars we just unpacked.
They absolutely do. And they really point towards those future trends the source material describes, all enabled by this kind of mobile innovation. You've got wireless charging, simplifying everything for the user, maybe automating fleet operations, solar integration, boosting sustainability and energy resilience for the charging assets themselves.
And that potential game changer, the bidirectional capability.
Yeah, turning EVs from just energy consumers into potentially mobile power reserves, which fundamentally changes their role in the whole energy ecosystem. And finally, you see the evolution of these mobile charging fleets into really sophisticated AI-managed systems that can provide power intelligently, efficiently, wherever it's needed, supporting not just individual drivers, but complex fleet operations, temporary events, even disaster response.
It definitely paints a picture of a charging future that's way more flexible and dynamic than just, lining up at the equivalent of a gas station. So as we wrap up this deep dive, the really clear takeaway from all the source material is that companies like BeeCharge, with this blend of modular hardware, off-grid capability, and all this cutting-edge tech, wireless, solar, V2X, AI logistics, they're fundamentally rethinking EV charging.
Yeah, they're moving it away from being just a fixed utility.
Right, towards an on-demand, intelligent mobile service, which seems perfectly suited for these complex places like LA that really struggle with the limitations of traditional infrastructure.
It's really about making the power source as mobile and adaptable as the vehicle itself, isn't it? Creating a more resilient energy network overall.
And that brings us to something really interesting to think about, especially reflecting on that V2X potential we discussed. Given the, rapidly increasing number of electric vehicles hitting the road and their growing ability to act as these mobile power reserves through bidirectional charging, how might our fundamental reliance on the big fixed electrical grid actually start to change in the coming years? Particularly when we face big challenges like widespread power outages or periods of really extreme peak demand. It's a pretty profound shift in how we might think about energy assets.